Fog drifts through the Appalachians like a memory that refuses to die. A widowed woodsman stands before a locked cabin, the one place his wife swore must never be opened. And 3 months after her passing, he breaks that promise. What waits inside bends more than grief. It bends time itself. This isn't a story about ghosts. It's about love so fierce it rewrites the rules of the living. Stay until the last breath of this tale, and you'll understand why some promises can save the world. If it pulls you in, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. In the fog-wrapped Appalachians, Caleb Monroe, a quiet black woodsman in his late 40s, stood still before the small cabin his late wife had once claimed as her sanctuary. He had built it for her 2 decades ago, with his own hands, never questioning why she wanted it separate from their home, deep among pines where the mist never lifted. Now, after her passing, it had become both a monument and a mystery, one he had sworn to leave untouched. His promise to Evelyn had been simple: never open this door no matter what happens. But grief was a heavy wind that bent even the strongest vows. For 3 months, Caleb had obeyed. For 3 months, he had walked past that cabin every dawn, setting traps and feeding his animals, pretending he didn't feel the pull. Yet every night, when the wind turned, he could swear he heard her humming inside. He told himself it was memory playing tricks, but deep down, he knew memory didn't hum in harmony with the trees. Standing beside him now was Alara, their 12-year-old daughter. Her hair curled just like her mother's did, but her eyes, warm, searching, belonged entirely to him. And near her, pressing his muzzle into the frost, was Asher, the aging German shepherd who had followed Evelyn everywhere in life and refused to sleep anywhere but near her grave after she was gone. Caleb's voice cracked as he whispered to the gray morning, "Forgive me, Evie, but secrets don't rest easy." The forest offered no reply, only the sound of snow melting on branches. Alara tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are you sure?" she asked softly. "Mama said we shouldn't go near it." He looked down at her at the innocence mixed with fear. "Your mama had her reasons," he said, "but sometimes reasons die when the person does." The words came out harsher than he meant. He sighed, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She was protecting us from something. I just don't know what." Alara frowned. "From ghosts." He smiled faintly. "From truth, maybe." Asher growled, low nose twitching toward the cabin's door. His fur stood slightly tail stiff. Caleb knew that look. The dog had always been half wild when it came to danger, half spirit when it came to Evelyn. It was as if he could sense things humans couldn't, storms before they came, footsteps, before they fell, sorrow, before it spoke. Caleb crouched, rubbing Asher's neck. "Easy, boy. If there's anything bad in there, you stay behind me." The shepherd leaned into his touch, a whine deep in his chest, not of fear, but of longing. He too had spent nights waiting outside that cabin, staring at the locked door like he expected her to step out again. Caleb rose, feeling the key in his coat pocket, the one Evelyn had given him to build the lock, though she had never allowed him to use it. "Strangest thing," he muttered to himself, "a woman who trusted me with her heart, but not her door." Alara looked up. "Maybe she didn't trust herself," she said simply, with the kind of truth only children carried. The wind shifted. A pine cone fell from above, striking the porch beside his boot. Caleb froze. Evelyn used to do that when they went hiking together, throw pine cones at him to get his attention when he wandered too far ahead. He remembered her laughter, the way her eyes narrowed when she smiled, how the sound echoed through these same woods. But she'd been gone for months. He looked around, heart pounding. "Evie," he whispered before he caught himself. The forest answered with silence, but the air around the cabin suddenly felt different, charged alive as if holding its breath. Alara picked up the pine cone and placed it gently on the porch railing. "Maybe it's her," she said, "telling us it's okay." Caleb wanted to believe that. God, he did. But he'd buried too many people to believe in signs. Still, his pulse wouldn't settle. The memory of Evelyn's final days flickered behind his eyes, how she'd seemed both peaceful and frightened, like someone who had seen too much. On her last night, she'd pulled him close, whispering with fading breath, "If you love me, promise me you'll never open that door." He'd nodded through tears. He would have promised anything. He didn't realize until now that promises could turn into prisons. He stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning beneath his boots. The lock gleamed silver even through years of dust, as if untouched by weather. "It's new," Alara said, running a mittened hand over it. "Did you replace it?" Caleb shook his head. "No, your mama did, 2 weeks before she died." The thought hit him like a blade. Why would she change the lock so close to her end? Asher pawed the ground, letting out a sharp bark that echoed into the hills. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled through the sky was clear. Caleb hesitated only a moment longer before pulling out the key. The metal was cold, older than the cabin itself, and strangely heavy. He slipped it into the lock. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting all along. He turned it slowly. The click sounded almost like a sigh. The hinges creaked once, then stopped, as if resisting. Caleb pushed harder. The warm air that escaped the cabin seemed to fade as quickly as it came, leaving only the ghost of a scent lavender and static, a smell that did not belong to the present. Caleb Monroe, still standing in the doorway, felt the weight of the past settle on his chest like the mountain mist outside. He remembered the first time he saw her 15 years ago, when the storm came down the valley like the wrath of heaven itself. He had been returning from town with his truck loaded in tools and canned goods when lightning split a pine clean in half, the crack echoing through the hills like a cannon blast. The rain poured so heavy he could barely see the road, and yet through that torrent, he saw her, a lone woman standing on the shoulder barefoot, her dress torn and soaked, her skin glistening under the flashes of light. She wasn't screaming, wasn't running, just standing there like someone who had no idea where she was or how she'd come to be. Caleb had slammed the brakes tires, sliding on the mud. When he jumped out and ran toward her, she didn't flinch as thunder roared overhead. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady and clear. "Please, I can't go back." He thought she meant an abusive husband, a runaway story, one he'd heard before in those mountains where people came to disappear. But as he wrapped his coat around her and helped her into the truck, something in her eyes caught him, not fear, but displacement, like a soul still catching up to its body. Her name, she said, was Evelyn. No last name at first, just Evelyn. She didn't know what town she was near or what year it was. Caleb thought she was delirious from the cold, so he took her home, gave her food, and let her rest in the guest room. The next morning the storm had passed, but she remained quiet, observant, sitting by the window like someone studying a world that wasn't hers. When Alara, then barely a toddler, toddled up and offered her a wooden toy, Evelyn had smiled for the first time. "Thank you, little one," she had said softly. "You remind me there's still gentleness in strange lands." It was the kind of sentence that lingered, that felt out of time. In the weeks that followed, she helped around the house, mended clothes, cooked recipes Caleb didn't recognize. One evening, when he asked where she had learned them, she paused, eyes distant, then said, "From my mother, long ago." He didn't push. But it wasn't just her knowledge that unsettled him. It was the way she handled objects, like she was trying to remember their use, like the weight of a hammer or the flicker of a lantern fascinated her. She often stared at the radio when he turned it on, her head tilted, as if the sound of modern music was both familiar and foreign. Then one morning, she brought him a small piece of cloth. "This tore off my dress," she said. "Could you tell me what kind of fabric this is?" Caleb looked at. It ran his fingers over the threads, smooth, strong, not like any cotton or silk he'd ever felt. He took it to a general store in town, showed it to the owner, who shook his head. "Never seen that weave before," the man said. "Feels wrong. Synthetic maybe, but not like any plastic I've handled. Caleb didn't ask again. He didn't want to know. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved, not yet. Still, he noticed how Evelyn always flinched at thunder, how she watched storms from a distance, whispering words under her breath. One night, when lightning struck the ridge above their cabin, she ran outside barefoot, staring into the sky like she recognized it, whispering, "It's trying to find me." Caleb had chased after her, grabbed her hand, shouting over the wind, "Find you! What are you talking about?" But she only shook her head, eyes wet hair whipping around her face. "Please, Caleb," she said, "if it ever happens again, promise me you'll keep Alara safe. Don't let her near the cabin." He didn't understand what she meant. He only saw a woman breaking apart under something invisible. Later, when the storm ended, she returned to her quiet self, gentle calm, but more distant than before. And then a week later, she asked him to build her a cabin, apart from the house, just far enough that she could walk there alone. She drew the plans herself, precise lines, detailed notes, measurements, exact to the inch. "I need a space for my thoughts," she said, "somewhere to write." Caleb built it, trusting her, loving her. He didn't know he was constructing a vault for her secrets. Alara, now older, listened to her father's stories by the cabin door, eyes wide. "You mean Mama just appeared out of nowhere?" she asked. Caleb nodded slowly. The road was washed out for days after that storm. Sheriff said no one could have come from the next town without being swept away. Alara frowned. So where did she come from? He didn't answer. The truth sat heavy in his chest. He didn't know. And part of him feared he never would. Inside the cabin, dust motes swirled through the light from his lantern, drifting like tiny planets. The warmth that had rushed out earlier was gone, replaced by the chill of still air. On the far wall hung Evelyn's old coat, the same one she had worn that first night. He reached for it and froze. The fabric was wrong. Not age-stained or brittle, but untouched by time, smooth as if it had just been woven. He ran his thumb along the stitching. It wasn't thread. It was metal fine and soft, humming faintly against his skin. Alara saw the look on his face. "Daddy," she asked. Caleb forced a smile. "Just cold sweetheart." But Asher growled again, a low rumble that came from deep inside his chest. The dog stepped closer to the coat nose, twitching, and whimpered. For the first time in months, Caleb felt true fear, not of what was behind the door, but of what might still be waiting in the dark corners of his wife's life. He looked around and saw more of her things: a small notebook, a lantern unlike any he had owned, and a stack of paper with words he didn't understand. Equations, symbols, patterns. Asher barked once sharply. Alara flinched, and then as if to answer, the bark thunder rolled again somewhere far away. Only this time, there were no clouds. The mountain sky was clear, cold, and silent, yet the sound lingered low and deep like the memory of a storm that never ended. Caleb felt his heart twist. The storm hadn't brought Evelyn to them by accident. It had delivered her. Every shelf, every nail, every carefully stacked journal told the story of a woman who had lived in secrecy within arm's reach of the family that loved her. Alara stayed close, clutching the hem of her father's coat, her small boots scuffing against the floorboards. Asher prowled the edges of the room, tail low nose, twitching at the scent of something he couldn't name. The dog's hackles lifted every time he passed near the small wooden desk by the window, the one Evelyn had always kept locked. Caleb exhaled slowly, brushing his fingers across the dust. "She used to come here every night," he murmured half to himself. Said she was writing, said she needed quiet. Alara's eyes traveled to the desk. Maybe she left her stories here. The simplicity of her voice made Caleb's heart ache. He wanted it to be true that Evelyn had been nothing more than a woman who liked to write in solitude, but the storm, the fabric that never aged, and the warmth that had escaped the room when the door opened told him otherwise. "Stay behind me," he said, kneeling to check the drawer. The wood creaked, but didn't give. He reached for the handle again, tugged harder, then stopped when he saw the faint carving on its surface. There, Etched in the grain, so shallow it was almost invisible, was a small symbol that looked like a spiral inside a circle. He didn't recognize it, but when the lantern light caught it, the carving glowed faintly blue before fading back into the wood. Alara gasped. "Daddy, it lit up." Caleb blinked, staring at his own trembling hand. "Old paint," he muttered, though the lie tasted bitter. "Just tricks of light." But Alara had already crouched beside him, curiosity stronger than fear. She tugged gently, and the drawer slid open with a sigh, releasing a puff of air that smelled faintly sweet, almost floral. Inside lay a small, dust-covered wooden box. It was no bigger than a loaf of bread, smooth to the touch, carved from cedar, with edges sharp and clean. "She hid something," Alara whispered. Caleb hesitated. Evelyn had never been materialistic. No jewelry, no heirlooms. What could she have sealed away so carefully? He lifted the box. It was heavier than it looked. The moment it touched his palms, a faint vibration ran through it like a heartbeat. He froze, eyes flicking to the dog. Asher's body went rigid. His ears flattened and a deep growl rolled from his throat. "Asher, easy," Caleb said, setting the box on the desk. But the shepherd's eyes were locked on it, his body trembling. Alara knelt and reached toward the box, but Asher barked sharply, stopping her hand inches away. Caleb grabbed the dog's collar. "That's enough," he hissed. The bark echoed through the cabin, startling a crow from the roof outside. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then slowly, Caleb lifted the lid. The hinges creaked, and the faint scent of cedar deepened. Inside lay a folded piece of parchment, a silver key, and a small coin the color of frost. Caleb frowned, picking up the coin between his fingers. One side bore a woman's face, crowned with stars. The other, an unfamiliar crest, a sun pierced by an arrow. The edges were impossibly sharp, the surface cold enough to sting. "This ain't no money I've ever seen," he said quietly. Alara peered closer. "Maybe it's from where Mama came from." Caleb hesitated. He didn't want to feed her imagination, but even his practical mind struggled for an explanation. He examined the parchment next. The ink hadn't faded despite the years. It wasn't English, not exactly. The letters curled in elegant loops, too precise, too symmetrical. A language perhaps, but not one he knew. At the bottom of the parchment, however, 2 words stood clear. "The key waits." He turned the phrase over in his mind, tracing the shape of the silver key beside it. Unlike anything he'd ever seen, it shimmered under the lantern's light, with a faint pulsing rhythm like metal that breathed. Alara's small hand brushed against his arm. "It's pretty," she said softly, "like it's alive." Caleb quickly closed the box. "Don't touch it again," he said more harshly than he intended. "It's not safe." She looked up at him, eyes wide and wounded. "You're scared. I'm cautious," he said. "There's a difference." But she wasn't wrong. He was scared in a way that reached deeper than any storm or threat of man. He could feel Evelyn's presence all around them, woven into every wall and board. She had left this behind for a reason. Asher pressed closer to his leg body, tense. The dog's gaze flicked toward the back of the room, where the floorboards shifted slightly, just enough to make a soft creak. Caleb swung the lantern in that direction. Nothing moved. Still, the feeling that something unseen was watching lingered. "Let's take this home," he said, finally, placing the box under his arm. "We'll look at it in daylight." Alara frowned. "Mama didn't want anyone in here." "What if she didn't want us to touch it either?" Caleb hesitated. "Maybe she didn't want strangers touching it," he said. "We're not strangers." Yet his stomach twisted around the lie. As they turned to leave, a soft click echoed behind them. Caleb spun, but the sound wasn't from the door, it came from the desk. The drawer they had opened was closing on its own. Slowly, smoothly, like a hand had guided it shut. Caleb stepped back, chest tight. Alara's breath caught her small fingers gripping his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered. "It's just wood settling," he said, voice hollow. But he couldn't explain why the silver key inside the box glowed faintly through the lid, a single thread of light that pulsed once and faded. When they stepped outside, the air had grown colder. The mountains were darker, quieter, as if holding its breath for them. Asher refused to leave the porch until Caleb called his name 3 times. Only then did the shepherd move head low, tail tucked. Caleb locked the cabin again, sliding the key from Evelyn's chain around his neck into the door. He could feel the weight of both keys, now the one his wife had trusted him with, and the one she had hidden. "You knew something, didn't you, Evie?" he muttered. "You knew it would come to this." The morning after finding the hidden box, Caleb Monroe sat awake before dawn, staring at the small cedar chest resting on the kitchen table. The silver key still pulsed faintly beneath the lid, its glow visible through a thin crack where the wood had warped overnight. Alara had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale from questions he could not answer. Asher lay beside her unmoving, except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. Caleb hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Evelyn's handwriting on the parchment, the key weights, and the way the drawer had shut itself, quiet and deliberate, as if sealing them into something far larger than they understood. When the first gray light crept over the windowsill, he decided. He couldn't pretend anymore. He had to know what Evelyn had been hiding, not just for himself, but for their daughter who had begun to carry her mother's same haunted silence. He rose-pocketed the key and called softly, "Alara, wake up! We're going back!" The girl stirred, blinking through the haze of sleep. "Now it's still dark." He nodded. "It won't be for long." Asher stretched, shaking the cold from his fur, then trotted to the door, tail swishing with uneasy energy. The dog always seemed to know when something was about to happen. Caleb grabbed the lantern and the shotgun out of habit, though he doubted either could help against whatever truth waited in that cabin. They walked through the trees in silence, the snow crunching beneath their boots, the air sharp and blue in the dawn light. Alara carried her mother's old scarf around her neck, refusing to leave it behind since the funeral. Caleb noticed how it looked too new, the color never fading no matter how many times it had been washed. He wondered if even the fabric had come from wherever Evelyn had once belonged. The cabin appeared between the trees like a shadow caught between worlds. Its roof glittered with frost, its windows dull. The air around it was still heavier than the rest of the forest. Caleb hesitated on the porch. He could almost hear Evelyn's laughter from years ago, when she had insisted he build this place just the way she designed it, every board measured to her precise instruction. Why so far out, he'd asked her, then half joking. Because she'd said, "I need quiet enough to hear my thoughts before they vanish." He hadn't realized she meant that literally. He unlocked the door again, and this time the warmth didn't greet them. The air inside was cold, dry, lifeless. The lantern's glow spread across the wooden walls, revealing everything he hadn't had the courage to explore the day before. The space looked less like a writer's retreat, and more like a workshop from another era. Brass tubes and polished glass cylinders sat beside instruments he couldn't name. A tall metal frame leaned against the back wall, its surface etched with markings like those in Evelyn's notebooks. He brushed a layer of dust from one of the devices, and a faint hum vibrated under his palm. He jerked his hand back. Alara clung to his coat. "What was that?" she asked. Nothing, he said too quickly, just air trapped in the wood. But Asher had begun pacing, circling the table in the center of the room. His ears twitched towards something unseen. The dog stopped beside an old photograph, half hidden under a stack of papers. Caleb lifted it carefully, his breath catching when he saw what it showed. There was Evelyn, her hair longer, her dress different, standing in front of a group of men in formal coats, the kind seen only in museums. Behind them was a building of stone and glass engraved with the words, "Royal Society of London." Beneath the photograph, someone had written the date, 1882. Caleb's throat closed. "That can't be right," he whispered. Alara craned her neck to see. "Is that Mama?" He nodded slowly. Looks like her, but that's over 100 years ago. Caleb felt the world tilt slightly, as if the ground had shifted beneath them. He turned the photo over. The back was covered in fine script, Evelyn's handwriting again, neat and deliberate. They said the experiment failed, but I am still here. He set it down, staring at the wall where more papers hung pinned with nails and string. Diagrams of machinery sketches of storms and equations filled the boards like pieces of an unfinished puzzle. She was working on something, he said, his voice shaking. Something no one should have been working on. He reached for another sheet, and this one showed a figure standing beside what looked like a metal ring connected by cables and rods. The caption read, Temporal Displacement Apparatus Mark II. He didn't know the meaning of the words, but he understood enough to feel fear crawl through his spine. Daddy, Alara said, pointing to a wooden trunk in the corner. What's that? He followed her gaze. The trunk was massive, bound in iron and sealed with 2 locks, the first identical to the one on the door, the second bearing the same spiral symbol from the drawer. Caleb took the silver key from his pocket. His hand trembled as he approached. Asher whined, stepping back, tail tucked. The air grew thick again, that same electric pulse returning to the room. Stay with me, Caleb said, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to his daughter the dog or himself. He inserted the key into the first lock. The mechanism turned with a heavy click. The second lock opened on its own, unlatching with a faint metallic sigh. The lid lifted slightly, as if pushed from within. A faint light flickered from the gap, soft blue like moonlight trapped in glass. Caleb opened it fully. Inside, beneath layers of folded linen, lay several journals bound in black leather, a metal object shaped like a compass, but covered in runes, and another photograph, this one of Evelyn standing alone beside the same ring-like machine drawn on her blueprints. Behind her, the room in the image shimmered with streaks of lightning that seemed to move even in the still frame. Caleb's hand shook as he picked up one of the journals. The first page began with a sentence that made his stomach drop. If I do not survive the crossing, may this record find the man I love and the child who carries my blood across the centuries. Alara's voice broke through the silence. Daddy, does that mean Mama came from the past? Caleb Monroe sat on the floor of the cabin, surrounded by fragments of a life that no longer made sense, his lantern flickering against walls lined with Evelyn's impossible inventions. The journals, the photographs, the strange metal ring, all of it pointed to a truth his heart refused to accept, but his eyes could no longer deny. His wife had come from another century, a different world entirely, and the cabin she had forbidden him to enter had been her bridge between times. Alara knelt beside him, clutching one of the black journals as though it were a treasure, her face pale but steady. Daddy, she said softly, there's something inside the trunk you didn't open. He looked up confused. I thought I emptied it. She shook her head and pointed to a small false panel inside the lid. The seam was nearly invisible, but under the lantern's glow, he could see it an outline shaped like an envelope. He pried at the edge with his pocket knife, and a small bundle of aged letters fell into his hands, wrapped neatly in blue ribbon, their edges browned with time, but their ink clear and sharp. The handwriting was not Evelyn's. It was firm, masculine, with long, sweeping strokes. The first envelope bore a stamp from London, and the year 1883. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the paper. The letter began, My dearest Evelyn, I pray this finds you, though reason tells me it cannot. The night of the experiment, the storm consumed everything. The apparatus failed, the currents reversed, and you, God help me, you were gone. Caleb read aloud until his voice broke. Alara stared in disbelief. He's talking about her. He thinks she disappeared. Caleb nodded, forcing himself to continue. I have scoured every record, every theory. If the calculations were correct, you may not have died, but crossed the barrier between times. If that is so, then wherever you are, I hope the world is kind. Know this, I will never stop searching for the light that took you. Caleb lowered the paper, the silence around him broken only by Asher's soft growl. The dog had moved closer to the trunk, nose pressed against the letter's tail, flicking uncertainly. The next letter was dated 3 months later. The society has condemned my work. They called it heresy witchcraft, disguised as science. I am leaving London for good. They destroyed the device, but they cannot destroy what we built in secret. I will rebuild it, Evelyn. I will find you, even if it takes my life. Caleb felt a chill slide down his spine. These weren't just love letters. They were confessions, proof that someone in her time had been part of this with her. Alara's voice broke through his thoughts. So she didn't just come here. She was sent. Caleb nodded slowly. Maybe she tried to get back. Maybe she never could. The lantern flickered, and for a second the air shimmered a faint vibration running through the wooden floor. He looked down, clutching the bundle tighter. The final letter in the stack bore no date, only a symbol pressed in red wax, the same spiral inside a circle carved on the drawer and the lock. The paper was thinner, and the ink shimmered faintly like it had been written yesterday. If you are reading this, Evelyn, you succeeded. The coordinates held. The ridge aligns with the storm's pulse. The gate will open again once the fields resonate. But beware, time bends, but it never forgives. If you built a life there, let it stay. Some crossings should not be undone. Beneath the words were numbers written in Evelyn's hand. Caleb recognized them instantly. He had seen them before engraved on the compass-like device from the trunk. They matched the map coordinates of their mountain ridge. Daddy, what does it mean? Alara asked, her eyes wide. Caleb rubbed a hand across his mouth. It means your mama didn't just come here by accident. She landed here on purpose. He leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. Everything made sense, and nothing did. Evelyn hadn't been lost. She'd been found by time itself. The weight of that truth pressed on him until he could hardly breathe. He looked around the cabin again and saw details he'd missed before: a map nailed to the wall, small pinholes marking locations across the Appalachian Range, notes scrawled beside them in faded ink. Magnetic field resonance threshold, return vector, and written larger at the bottom, the word home. Caleb stood, his body shaking. She wasn't hiding from us. She was protecting us. Alara frowned, from what he hesitated, from whatever made her run in the first place. The air stirred suddenly. A gust of wind swept through the open door, scattering papers across the room. Asher barked, leaping to his feet. The lantern flame danced violently before dying, plunging them into half-darkness. The only light came from the silver key on the table. It glowed brighter, pulsing with steady rhythm matching the beat of Caleb's heart. Alara clung to her father's arm. Daddy, it's doing it again. He stepped closer, eyes fixed on the key. It wasn't just glowing, it was reacting, answering something unseen. The hum deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. From the trunk came another sound, faint but unmistakable, a soft tapping, as if someone were knocking from inside the wood. Caleb froze. Asher growled, low, teeth bared. The tapping grew louder, then stopped. Silence. Caleb reached for the key, and the light dimmed instantly, the hum fading. He swallowed hard. We're done here for tonight. But as he turned towards the door, something in the far corner caught his attention. A small wooden box, half buried under fallen papers. Unlike the cedar chest, this one was darker polished, engraved with the same spiral symbol. He knelt, pried it open, and found inside a single folded letter addressed not to Evelyn, but to CM. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. To the one she chose, it began. If you found this, she trusted you. Protect what she left behind. The storm will return, and with it the choice she could not make. Keep the girl away from the gate. Her blood remembers. Caleb's eyes blurred. He could barely read the final line. Love her as I could not. There was no signature. Only a faint watermark at the bottom that read JH, the same initials from the letters. He sat in silence, the words echoing through him. His wife had been loved by another man, a man from another century, and yet that man had entrusted her family to him. It wasn't jealousy that filled him, but awe, sorrow, and a sense that he was only beginning to understand the magnitude of Evelyn's story. Snow fell heavily through the night, blanketing the ridge and swallowing the path that led to Evelyn's cabin. The world outside seemed frozen in stillness, but inside their home, Caleb Monroe sat awake, staring at the bundle of letters spread across the table. The fire had burned down to embers, yet he couldn't move away from the words that refused to stop echoing in his mind. Keep the girl away from the gate. Her blood remembers. Every line of Professor Hartwell's letters ran like a pulse through his thoughts, and now he couldn't tell if it was fear or grief that kept his heart racing. Alara slept fitfully on the couch beside Asher, her small frame curled beneath a blanket that once belonged to Evelyn. The old shepherd lay close, his eyes half open, watching the fire as if he too were standing guard against something unseen. Caleb rose quietly, moving toward the window. The night outside was black, the wind whispering against the panes. He could almost feel Evelyn's presence, soft, familiar, but distant, as though she were caught between breaths of time. He whispered to the empty room, "You said you'd never leave us, Evie. Why does it feel like you still haven't?" The question hung unanswered. He turned back to the table, where the compass-like device lay beside the letters, its metallic surface faintly glowing in rhythm with the wind. The symbol engraved on its back, the spiral and the circle matched every mark she'd ever carved into her journals. He reached for it, but Asher gave a low growl, tail twitching. The dog's instincts were sharper than his own reason, and Caleb knew better than to ignore him now. He backed away and sat down again, exhausted. He didn't notice Alara wake until she spoke softly. "Daddy," he turned, startled. Her eyes were open, glimmering in the faint firelight. "Why didn't Mama ever tell us?" she asked. Her voice was steady, too calm for a child. Caleb knelt beside her. "She wanted to protect us," he said. "Some truths hurt more than lies." Alara shook her head. "But I dreamed of her tonight. She said she left something for me." His breath caught. "Where the cabin," she said simply. "Under the floor." Caleb felt the old dread creep back into his bones. He wanted to tell her it was just a dream, but the cabin had already proven that nothing in Evelyn's world was ever just imagination. By morning, the snow had eased enough for them to walk. The ridge glistened white, the air thick with fog. Asher led the way, his paws leaving deep prints in the snow. Alara followed close behind, clutching her mother's scarf. When they reached the cabin, the air felt charged again, faintly humming, as if remembering them. Inside, everything looked the same. The journals, the trunk, the machine sketches. But there was a new weight in the air, a sense that the cabin was no longer just a place. It was listening. Alara walked straight to the corner near the desk, knelt, and pressed her palm against the floorboards. "Here," she said. Caleb hesitated, then pried at the wood with the back of his knife. The plank lifted easily, revealing a narrow compartment beneath. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook wrapped in fabric. He lifted it carefully, brushing off dust. The front cover bore Evelyn's handwriting. "Subject EM observations following temporal displacement." He stared at the initials, his stomach twisting. "EM," he murmured. "Evelyn Monroe." But when he opened the first page, his breath caught in his throat. Subject EM female, born March 12th. Genetic profile consistent with both origin timelines. Development exceeds predicted parameters. Retains memory flashes not associated with current temporal environment. Caleb's hands shook. "No," he whispered. Alara peered over his arm, her brow furrowing. "Is she writing about herself?" He swallowed hard, turning the pages. The entries continued in precise detail, describing the child's accelerated learning, her ability to recall patterns and symbols she had never been taught, even the way she seemed to recognize storms before they arrived. Every few pages, Evelyn's tone changed from scientific to maternal, from detached to desperate. She hums to herself the same tune that played the night of the storm. She dreams of places she's never seen. Sometimes she says words I don't recognize, maybe Old English, maybe not English at all. She looks at me like she knows more than I do. Caleb's vision blurred as he reached the final entry. If Hartwell is right, her blood carries the residual frequency of the event. If the machine ever activates again, it will respond to her. I cannot let that happen. I must hide everything, even from Caleb. He will never forgive me, but if she stays, she lives. His hands went cold. He turned the page. One last line stood alone, written in hurried script. She is not an experiment. She is my heart, my bridge between worlds. He sat there in silence, the wind moaning outside his body, hollow. The notebook slipped from his hands and fell to the floor. Alara bent to pick it up, her small hands trembling. She was afraid of me. Caleb shook his head. No, baby, she was afraid for you. Asher pressed close, resting his head on Alara's knee, sensing her tears before they fell. The cabin's walls creaked the air, shifting as if responding to the words that had finally been spoken aloud. Caleb looked at the pages again. Your mama thought you could open whatever she came through. Alara frowned. But I don't want to. I just want her back. Caleb reached out, cupping her face in his calloused hands. So did she, he said. That's why she stayed. The words came out rough, breaking somewhere between anger and love. He wanted to curse the past, the science, the man who had written those letters, but mostly he wanted to curse time itself for stealing from them what no man should lose. Alara stared down at the notebook. Do you think I'm like her? She asked. I think you're her hope, he said, and that scares me more than anything. Outside, thunder murmured faintly across the ridge again, though the sky was clear. Asher raised his head, ears pricked. Caleb looked up, every nerve in his body tightening. We're leaving, he said, grabbing the notebook. But before he could move, the floor beneath them gave a faint shudder, almost like a heartbeat deep within the mountain. Dust drifted from the rafters, and the lantern flickered violently before going out. The next morning broke gray and hollow, the sky dim and heavy with snow that refused to fall. Caleb Monroe sat by the window, his hands trembling around a cup of untouched coffee, the notebook open before him on the table. The words Evelyn had written would not stop echoing in his head. If the machine ever activates again, it will respond to her. Alara moved quietly in the background, brushing Asher's coat, her small face drawn with confusion that looked far too old for her age. She hadn't spoken much since they left the cabin. Every few minutes she would glance at the window, as though expecting to see Evelyn's face again. Caleb told himself she had imagined it, but deep down, he wasn't sure. He'd seen it too, the faint outline, the eyes that still held warmth even through death and time. The fire crackled in the hearth, filling the silence with its low rhythm. But outside, the wind carried a strange hum that rose and fell like a distant engine, buried beneath the snow. Asher lifted his head every time it came, ears twitching toward the ridge. Something's out there, Alara whispered finally. Caleb looked up from the notebook, his voice rough. It's just the wind. But he knew it wasn't. The dog's unease was never wrong. He went to the window and scanned the tree line. Through the mist, a dark figure moved slowly toward their cabin, walking with a cane coat whipping in the wind. Caleb's heart began to pound. The man came alone, his shape growing clearer as he reached the gate. His hair was gray, his beard thin, and his clothes, though clean, were strange old-fashioned, the kind of wool coat and vest no one had worn in half a century. He knocked once, then waited, his breath fogging in the cold. Caleb hesitated, his instincts torn between caution and the same gnawing curiosity that had led him into Evelyn's secrets in the first place. He opened the door halfway. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice wary. The man tipped his hat politely. "Mr. Monroe?" I presume his accent was unmistakably British. the vowels crisp and soft at the same time. "My name is James Hartwell." Caleb froze, his knuckles tightening on the door. "Hartwell." He repeated the name heavy on his tongue. "You're the one from the letters." The man smiled, faintly sadness hiding behind the gesture. "Then she did receive them," he said. "I prayed she had." Caleb's throat tightened. "You're supposed to be dead. Those letters are over 100 years old." Hartwell's eyes softened, reflecting both exhaustion and wonder. "Time doesn't pass the same for everyone, Mr. Monroe. Not when one meddles with forces meant for gods." He looked past Caleb into the house, his gaze landing on the open notebook. "You've read her notes, haven't you?" Caleb blocked the doorway instinctively. "You have no right to come here," he said sharply. "She left all that behind, and yet it's returning," Hartwell said quietly. "You've heard it, haven't you? The hum the thunder without storm." Caleb didn't answer, but his silence was enough. Hartwell sighed, removing his gloves. Around his wrist was a small metal band engraved with the same spiral emblem that marked Evelyn's journals. "That sound means the gate is waking," he said. "It responds to energy left unfinished to bloodlines that remember." His eyes drifted toward Alara, who was standing behind Caleb, now her hand resting on Asher's collar. "So this is her," Hartwell murmured. "The child born between." Caleb stepped forward, voice rising. "You stay away from her." "I don't mean her harm," Hartwell said, raising a calming hand. "You think I traveled across oceans and centuries to harm the last piece of Evelyn's heart?" His voice cracked then, and for a fleeting second Caleb saw not a stranger, but a man broken by time itself. "I came to warn you." The wind outside howled louder, shaking the windows. Alara flinched. Asher barked, once his growl deepening as if responding to something unseen. Hartwell turned toward the sound. "It's beginning again," he whispered. Caleb grabbed his arm. "What's beginning the resonance?" Hartwell said. "Evelyn's work wasn't destroyed. The machine she built wasn't just a door. It was an echo. Every storm since that night carries part of its frequency, and now it's found her blood." Caleb's face paled. "You mean my daughter?" "Yes," Hartwell said softly. "Evelyn knew this might happen. That's why she left her notes, why she warned you never to open the cabin. She hoped the gate would forget. But time doesn't forget, Mr. Monroe. It only waits." He moved toward the table and set a small metal device beside the letters, a compass-shaped instrument with a glass dial that pulsed faintly blue. "I tracked the signal here. The field is active again. If it strengthens, it will reopen the same way it did before, and if it does, it won't stop with just one traveler." Caleb's mind raced, his pulse pounding in his ears. "What happens if it opens? Then the past and the present will meet," Hartwell said. "And neither will survive unchanged." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind subsided, replaced by a deep, steady hum that seemed to come from within the earth itself. The walls of the cabin trembled slightly, dust sifting from the beams. Hartwell looked toward Alara again, sorrow filling his face. "She's the key," he said, "just like Evelyn feared. She's a child," Caleb snapped. "She's my daughter." Hartwell nodded slowly. "And that's why she must never go near that cabin again." Alara stepped forward, then her voice quiet but strong. "What if it's calling her?" Both men turned to her, startled. She held Evelyn's scarf tightly in her hands. "It feels like something's trying to pull inside me when the thunder starts," she said. "Like it's in my chest." Caleb's heart clenched. He knelt, gripping her shoulders. "You listen to me, baby. You fight that feeling you hear. You fight it with everything you've got." Hartwell knelt beside them. "She won't be able to for long," he said softly. "The resonance feeds on awareness. The more she knows, the stronger it becomes. That's why Evelyn tried to keep her ignorant. The less she remembered, the safer she stayed." Caleb glared at him. "Then tell me how to stop it." Hartwell reached into his coat and pulled out another folded paper. It was brittle, covered in symbols and coordinates, similar to those in Evelyn's notebook. "You can't stop time," he said, "but you can anchor it." There's a place near the ridge, a cave where she first emerged. If we can reach it before the storm peaks, we might be able to collapse the field permanently. But if we fail, we won't." Caleb interrupted. "We can't." Hartwell studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we move before dusk. The pulse is strongest at night." Caleb rose, jaw tight. "You brought this back with you," he said bitterly. "You shouldn't have come." Hartwell gave a weary smile. "I've been running from this moment for over a century, Mr. Monroe. It was always going to find me again, and her." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. Asher barked sharply, pacing by the door tail rigid. The hum beneath their feet deepened, a rhythm that felt almost alive. Caleb looked at Alara, at her frightened eyes and trembling hands, and felt something inside him harden. The snow thickened as dusk approached, the wind cutting across the ridge with a sound that seemed to echo from another world. Caleb Monroe led the way, his lantern swinging through the storm, its dim light barely reaching the trees ahead. Alara clung to his hand, her scarf whipping against her face, while James Hartwell followed close behind, leaning heavily on his cane. Asher ran ahead, his black and tan coat nearly blending into the gathering shadows, nose to the ground, following a scent that seemed to pull him forward with invisible strings. The ridge loomed above them, a spine of stone and pine sharp against the gray sky. Hartwell shouted over the wind, his breath ragged. "We must hurry." The pulse strengthens with every drop in pressure. Caleb turned, gripping his coat tighter around Alara. "You're saying this storm isn't natural?" Hartwell's eyes glinted under the lantern light. "Nothing about this is natural. It's the same atmospheric distortion that accompanied her arrival. The gate feeds on magnetic fields, and the snow amplifies them." Caleb clenched his jaw and pressed forward. He didn't understand half the words Hartwell used, but he understood danger when he heard it. The sound beneath the wind, a low hum like metal under strain, was growing louder, and the air around them shimmered faintly. When they reached the mouth of the cave, the air temperature dropped so suddenly that Alara gasped, her breath turning into thick white clouds. The entrance was partially sealed by fallen rock and frost, but behind the cracks, faint blue light pulsed in slow rhythm. Caleb turned to Hartwell. "You've been here before, haven't you?" The older man hesitated, his face drawn. "Once," he admitted. "Long ago. The night she disappeared, this cave was the epicenter. I thought it had collapsed completely, but the readings..." He stopped, adjusting the device strapped to his wrist. The compass-like dial spun wildly, the needle locked on the cave's center. "It's still active." Caleb pushed through the narrow opening, pulling Alara close. Inside, the air buzzed faintly dry and metallic. The walls of the cave glowed with veins of strange mineral streaks, silver and faintly transparent, like veins of frozen lightning. As they moved deeper, the light grew stronger, pulsating in waves. Asher stopped suddenly, tail low, growling at the darkness ahead. "Easy, boy," Caleb said, raising the lantern. The glow illuminated the chamber's heart and what stood within it. It was a massive ring of copper and iron fused into the stone itself. The metal was twisted in parts, scorched in others, but it was unmistakably deliberate, crafted by human hands. Around its base, wires coiled like snakes connected to a shattered console half buried under rock. Even broken, the device thrummed with power. "My God," Hartwell whispered, falling to his knees. "She rebuilt it. She finished the machine." Caleb stared, unable to look away. The ring was easily 15 feet wide, tall enough to swallow the entrance of the cabin whole. Its surface glimmered faintly, reflecting the light like liquid metal. "This is what brought her here?" he asked. "This is what she ran from." Hartwell nodded, eyes wet with awe and guilt. "She completed what I couldn't. She turned theory into reality. She used the storm as a conduit. But she must have realized, too late, that crossing time leaves ripples, and those ripples never fade." Caleb glanced at Alara, who stood frozen beside Asher. Her face was pale, her eyes locked on the glowing metal. "It feels alive," she said softly. Hartwell reached for her arm. "Don't go near it," he warned. "It will sense you." But even as he spoke, the hum grew louder, deeper, pulsing in time with Alara's heartbeat. The light reflected in her eyes grew brighter. Asher barked, his body stiff, his fur bristling. Caleb grabbed Alara's shoulder, pulling her back. But the moment his hand touched her, the entire chamber flared with light. The ring ignited arcs of blue lightning leaping from its surface to the cave walls. The hum became a roar vibrating through their bones. Alara screamed, clutching her chest. "It's inside me," she cried. Caleb shielded her with his body, shouting to Hartwell. "What's happening?" The old man fumbled with the device on his wrist, shouting over the noise. "It's reacting to her. She's synchronizing with the residual energy, the same resonance that brought Evelyn through." "Then stop it," Caleb yelled. "I can't," Hartwell shouted back. "It's not mechanical anymore. It's alive. It's responding to blood." Lightning tore through the chamber, striking the copper ring, sending ripples of light through the stone walls. Caleb looked up in horror as faint images flickered in the glow shadows, moving across time itself. He saw Evelyn standing where Alara now stood, her hair whipping around her face, eyes filled with both terror and resolve. Her voice broke through the thunder, a faint echo carried across years. "Caleb," it whispered. "Don't let it take her," Evie Caleb shouted, his heart breaking as her image flickered again, reaching out. For one impossible instant, he felt her hand brush his face, warm, real, and then she vanished. The light dimmed slightly, leaving only the low pulse of the machine. Alara collapsed against him, breathing hard. "Daddy," she gasped. "She's in there. I felt her." Hartwell stumbled forward, sweat streaking his face. "We have to leave now. The resonance is building. It's drawing the storm back. If it opens fully, it will consume both sides." Caleb looked towards the ring, where faint strands of lightning continued to dance. "Can it be destroyed?" Hartwell shook his head. "You can't destroy time, Mr. Monroe. You can only close its door." "Then how?" Caleb demanded. Hartwell pointed to the console. Evelyn designed a failsafe. She must have left instructions somewhere. Look for a sequence, something familiar. Alara's eyes widened suddenly. The numbers, she said breathlessly. From the letter on the compass, the coordinates. Caleb pulled the device from his pocket, the dial spinning wildly. The coordinates etched into its back matched those carved into the console's surface. He knelt, tracing the symbols with his thumb. "If I match the sequence, it might stabilize it," Hartwell said. "Or end everything worth the risk," Caleb said grimly. He began turning the dials, aligning the numbers, the metal heating beneath his hands. Asher barked frantically, pacing between them and the ring. The glow intensified, filling the chamber with searing light. Now Hartwell shouted, "Pull the lever!" Caleb slammed it down. For a heartbeat, silence consumed the world. Then the ring exploded with light, so pure and blinding that the entire mountain seemed to shake. The storm outside answered with a crash of thunder, the cave walls trembling as if the earth itself had cried out. Caleb threw himself over Alara, shielding her as debris rained from above. The hum faded slowly into nothing. The wind had calmed by the time they returned from the cave, but the mountain no longer felt like home. The world around them seemed changed, quieter, as if the snow itself had forgotten how to breathe. Caleb Monroe walked ahead through the drifts, his coat torn, his hands raw from gripping the frozen rope they had used to scale down the ridge. Behind him, James Hartwell leaned heavily on his cane, each step a battle against exhaustion. Alara rode on Caleb's back, her arms wrapped around his shoulders, silent, except for the soft rhythm of her breathing. Asher trotted beside them, his fur matted with frost and ash, his head lowered, but his eyes alert to every whisper of the wind. The cave entrance had collapsed behind them, sealing the device within its tomb of stone and ice. They had survived, but the memory of what they saw inside the light, Evelyn's face reaching through time, the sound of her voice whispering his name, clung to Caleb's mind like smoke. He didn't speak for a long time. When they reached their cabin, night had fallen, and the fire from earlier was cold, He set Alara down and knelt by the hearth, striking the flint until sparks caught the kindling. The flames rose slowly, painting the room in amber light. Hartwell sank into a chair, his body trembling. His face pale, but his eyes bright with the strange calm of a man who had finally seen proof of everything he had once believed. "It's over," Caleb said at last, though the words tasted hollow. Hartwell shook his head. "For now. Time heals, but it never forgets." Caleb looked up sharply. "You talk about time like it's a person." Hartwell smiled weakly. "After what we've seen, would you call it anything less?" The old man reached into his coat and withdrew the small compass device Caleb had used in the cave. The glass dial was cracked, now its glow extinguished. "You should keep this," he said, setting it on the table. "It belongs to her family now." Caleb stared at it, but didn't move to take it. The silence between them was heavy. Alara broke it softly. "Mama's still in there, isn't she?" Hartwell turned his gaze toward her, his expression gentler. "Yes, child. But she's not suffering. She's part of something vast now. The energy that holds that gate together. It's her choice that keeps it from opening again." Caleb stood slowly, voice thick with disbelief. Her choice. She bound herself to the resonance, Hartwell said. She gave the machine a constant to follow her life force. Without it, the fields would collapse into chaos. You would have lost everything. Caleb's chest tightened. "So she trapped herself to save us. She anchored time," Hartwell said softly, "and the world stayed whole because of her." The truth hit Caleb like a hammer. All the nights he'd cursed her for secrecy, all the times he'd thought she didn't trust him, and all along she'd been protecting them from something he couldn't even comprehend. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Alara walked to the table and picked up the broken compass. Her fingers traced its surface, gently feeling the cool metal against her skin. There was a faint line along the rim, barely visible in the firelight. "Daddy," she said, "there's something inside." Caleb looked up. "What?" She pressed the edge of her fingernail into the seam, and a small latch clicked open. A folded piece of parchment slid free, fragile but intact. Hartwell leaned forward. "That's her handwriting." Caleb took it carefully, his heart pounding as he unfolded it. The ink shimmered faintly, as though time itself had preserved her words. The letter began simply, "To my loves, Caleb and Alara." He read it aloud, his voice breaking with every line. "If you're reading this, it means the gate has closed, and my work is done. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I feared the truth would destroy more than silence ever could. The storm that brought me here was not an accident. I chose it. I crossed to escape a world that was dying, poisoned by its own progress. When I met you, Caleb, I saw the goodness that my time had forgotten. You gave me a second chance at life, at love. But when Alara was born, I realized that I had given something dangerous to this world, a child who carries both past and future within her." Caleb stopped, unable to speak. Alara reached for his hand, eyes wide and glistening. He continued, "I hid my research to protect her. I built the cabin to contain the energy that lingered from my crossing. And when the storms began to whisper again, I knew the gate would seek her blood. I couldn't let that happen, so I gave it something else to follow me. I bound my energy to the machine, sealed it from within. It will hold as long as love anchors it. Don't come looking for me. I'm not lost, just home in a different way." Caleb's tears hit the page, blurring the ink. He could barely read the final lines. "Tell our daughter she is the best thing I ever created, not in science, but in love. Tell her she was never an experiment. She is the proof that time can be kind. And when the thunder rolls, don't fear it. It's just me reminding you that love never ends. Yours always, Evelyn." The room was silent, except for the soft crackle of the fire. Alara wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, whispering, "She's not gone, Daddy." Caleb swallowed hard. "No, baby, she's not." Hartwell stood slowly, pulling on his coat. "I must go," he said quietly. "There's nothing left for me here. The field will fade now, and my time is borrowed as it is. The machine kept me alive through its resonance. Without it, I'll return to where I belong." Caleb rose. "You mean you'll die?" Hartwell smiled faintly. "We all return home eventually, Mr. Monroe. Some of us just take the long way." He reached down to pat Asher's head, the old dog leaning into his touch. "You've got good company here. Keep them safe." Caleb nodded, unable to speak. Hartwell turned toward the door, stepping out into the cold. The wind swallowed him quickly, and within seconds he was gone into the white. The wind shifted again that night, carrying with it the scent of rain and the far-off rumble of thunder. The fire in the cabin had burned low, its glow soft against the wooden walls, and Caleb Monroe sat staring at the compass on the mantel, unable to tear his eyes away from its silent gleam. The words from Evelyn's final letter still echoed in his mind. "When the thunder rolls, don't fear it. It's just me." He wanted to believe her. He wanted to trust that she was safe somewhere beyond the reach of time's cruelty, but grief had a way of making even miracles feel hollow. Alara slept upstairs, her breathing light and steady, one hand wrapped around Asher's fur, as though afraid he might disappear too. Outside, the wind began to pick up speed, swirling the snow into a ghostly dance across the ridge. Caleb rose, his heart pounding faster with each distant roll of thunder. The storm wasn't supposed to come back so soon. He walked to the window, watching as the trees swayed under invisible hands, their branches trembling. He whispered under his breath, "Evelyn, what did you do?" The lantern flickered. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that came from the absence of light rather than the season itself. Then he saw it, a faint blue glow deep within the woods, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. It shimmered through the fog, beckoning. He felt an ache in his chest, the same pull he had felt when he first opened her cabin door. It was as if the mountain itself was calling him again. He grabbed his coat and boots, but before he could step outside, a small voice stopped him. Daddy Alara whispered from the stairs, her hair-tousled eyes wide. "She's here." He froze. "What do you mean?" Alara pointed toward the forest. "The light, it woke me up. It's her." Caleb's throat tightened. He wanted to protect her, keep her away from the storm, but he also knew that sometimes the only way to keep someone safe was to let them see the truth. "Stay close to me," he said. "Don't run ahead." They stepped into the storm together, Asher leading the way. The wind howled through the trees, carrying flecks of snow that stung their faces. The light grew stronger the farther they walked, flickering like a lantern swinging in the dark. It didn't feel menacing, just familiar tender, like a memory that refused to die. When they reached the clearing, the glow hung in midair above the frozen ground, soft and pure, and from within it, a shape began to form. It was Evelyn. Not flesh, not shadow, but light. Her face clear, her eyes, gentle, her voice as calm as the day they first met. "My love," she said, her voice echoing softly through the snow. "If you see this, it means the gate is closed for good. I am safe where I am. I can't come back, but I can see you." Alara gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Mama," she whispered, "I knew you'd come." Evelyn smiled. "I never left, sweetheart. I've been here all along, in every storm, in every breath of wind that touched your face. I wanted to tell you that you must live freely now. Don't let time keep you trapped as it kept me. The past was my prison, but love was my release." Caleb stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Evelyn, I read your letter. I know what you did. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," she interrupted softly, "because I loved you both too much to let time devour what we built. You gave me a home, Caleb. You gave me peace. I came from a world that had forgotten what those words meant. You reminded me." The light around her flickered, and for a moment she looked less like a vision and more like the woman he had held in his arms all those years ago, flesh and warmth and laughter. "Tell her," she said, nodding toward Alara. "Tell her to live." Caleb turned to his daughter, who stood motionless in the snow, her hands trembling. "She hears you, Evie," he said softly. "She'll live. I'll make sure of it." Evelyn's smile deepened, her eyes glistening. Then I can rest. The wind began to calm, the snow falling slower, quieter. Asher stepped forward, his paws leaving delicate prints in the white. He stopped before the light, tilting his head, and let out a soft, mournful sound. Not a bark, but a whine of recognition. Evelyn looked down at him, her expression breaking into quiet joy. "Good boy," she whispered. "You found me again." Asher's tail wagged once before he sat in the snow, lifting his gaze to her. The blue light flared brighter for a moment, illuminating the entire clearing. Then slowly, it began to fade. Evelyn's outline dissolved into the air like mist. No Alara cried, taking a step forward, but Caleb held her back gently. "Let her go," he said softly. "She's free." The last trace of light swirled upward, merging with the falling snow until the night was dark again. Only the faint echo of her voice lingered, whispering through the trees, "I love you." Caleb knelt, pulling Alara close, their tears freezing against their skin. Asher pressed against them both, his body warm and solid. They stayed like that for a long time, until the storm finally broke and the moon returned clear and bright above the ridge. When they walked home, the woods were silent, except for the crunch of snow beneath their boots. Back in the cabin, Caleb placed the compass on the table once more. This time, when the thunder rolled in the distance, it sounded soft, almost like laughter. Alara climbed into his lap, resting her head against his chest. "Do you think she's happy?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly, staring at the window, where the snow still drifted past. "I think she's finally home." Asher lay near the fire, his eyes half-closed, ears twitching at the soft sound of wind. The old shepherd had seen what no living creature was meant to see, but he understood it better than any of them. In his quiet heart, he knew she hadn't vanished. She had simply gone where loyalty and love always lead home. The storm outside eased into calm, and for the first time since Evelyn's passing, the mountain felt at peace. Caleb closed his eyes, hearing her voice in the rustle of the trees, her laughter woven into the wind. He whispered to the empty room, "You kept your promise, Evie. You found your way back." The fire flickered once, casting a golden glow across the compass, and for a heartbeat, it pulsed faintly with blue light before fading. Caleb smiled, tears shining in his eyes, and wrapped his arms around his daughter. "Come on, baby," he murmured. "Tomorrow we start again." Outside, dawn crept slowly over the horizon, painting the snow in gold. The cabin stood silent, smoke curling from its chimney, a home suspended between the echoes of two worlds, but whole at last. The end. If this story moved, you hit like and subscribe so more people can find it too. Tell me in the comments what part of Evelyn's journey hit you hardest. And where in the world are you watching from tonight?